Hello world. Let's dig into what a commute in Tokyo, Japan would look like versus one in Indianapolis, Indiana. Obviously, the size of the cities aren't comparable, but I believe a lot of what you'll see can be found in a typical Japanese or US commute. We start off in Japan. Let's look at getting to one's job. In Tokyo, it's the default to walk to the train station, which is about 10 minutes away from your home. You happen to live in a single detached home, but on the left and right, there are low-rise apartments. At the end of the very short street is the local elementary school. The narrow roads are two-way streets with no sidewalks. You're not worried about being run over, though, since the speed limit is 30 kilometers or 19 miles an hour. Only local cars would drive here, as it's not convenient to use this kind of road to get across the city. On your way to the train station, you cut through the neighborhood using the narrow streets where the majority of people are not in a car. After you pass a little park, you encounter your first sidewalk. While some people may use it, many don't, as there's not much vehicle traffic. You enter the Shotengai, a shopping street, which is very common to find near train stations. This is the first street you've encountered that has two lanes separated by a central dividing line. The streets are still narrow since there's no on-street parking. There is a bus loop, but you're going to use the train to get to work. To get on the train, you tap your IC card to get past the turnstile. The cost of the trip is of no concern since your workplace pays for your commute. This is nothing special since it's common practice for employers in Japan to pay for their workers' commutes. On the train, you're packed in tight, kind of like all the buildings you saw on your walk to work. There's no seat, and you stand for the entire 14-minute ride. This is actually a much shorter ride than most commuters in Tokyo would have to take. The train passes under the Shuto Expressway, which is a toll highway. Leaving the station, you see that there are many shops tucked in under the train line. Might be a good place for lunch later. You cut through a park on your walk to work, which passes between a high school, elementary school, and kindergarten. By the time you get to work, you've walked 1,300 meters, which is 1,700 steps. You arrive at your job at a clinic 32 minutes after leaving your home. This is considered a good commute in Tokyo. The average is 51 minutes from door to door. Now let's go over to Indianapolis, Indiana. Your house is located alongside other single-family homes, and in fact, only single-family homes. Multifamily homes, like apartments or duplexes, are not allowed, nor are businesses. In America, it's the default to drive to work. By car, it's a 35-minute drive in the morning. But by bus, it would be an hour and 45 minutes, including a 23-minute walk to the stop. The bus only comes every half an hour, though, so you wouldn't want to miss it. You don't have time for the bus, so you hop in your car and start driving. There's hardly any traffic as you drive along the suburban side street. You pull onto 82nd, which will connect you to I-69. To your left is the church, as well as to your right. You're now entering a commercial zone where residential buildings aren't allowed. It's time to get on the I-69, the interstate highway system. When there's no traffic, it's fast, but when there is traffic, not so much. You pass under the I-465. It's the beltway circling Indianapolis. And as soon as you are on it, you're off the interstate and now are on a divided 4-lane highway with turn lanes. You'll pass by lots of strip malls. They'll have big parking lots thanks to the minimum parking requirements. You'll notice a lot of billboards as you drive. The signage is dependent on the design speed of the road, so the faster the road, the bigger the signs. We're in the city of Indianapolis, but we're traveling through what looks like a forest. However, behind the trees are residential neighborhoods. Although it may look like housing on the right, it's in fact storage units. There are no pedestrians, cyclists, or even city buses on this road. The road has now changed into Fall Creek Parkway. The interesting thing about this road is that it's a 5-lane road where, depending on the time of day, it'll be 3 lanes one way and then 2 lanes the other. The arrows changed to show which lanes are safe to travel in. It's an older neighborhood, and there's a multi-use trail on the left for cyclists and pedestrians. You pass under an abandoned railroad corridor that's now a multi-use path. These houses are very big, and in Japan, some people might even consider them mansions. This is a historic apartment complex. There's not many of them left. Even though there are sidewalks here, it's pretty rare to see people walking on them. You cross under the I-65, which can take you from the Great Lakes in the north to the Gulf of Mexico in the south. It's part of the nationwide interstate system that's free to drive on, like most roads in America. You take the bridge over Fall Creek. On your left, off in the distance, is the tallest building in Indy. Because the road is so old, the lanes get narrower, and you're now passing through an industrial area. Again, no one's walking around here. It's full of utilities, moving companies, and self-storage units. This is the People Mover. It's a monorail that is now closed, but they still send lab samples through the pneumatic tubes. You made it to the hospital where you work at. And you park your car in the staff parking. You've gotten in 300 steps, which is mostly from having to walk from the parking lot to your building. I made this video together with Lisa, an urban designer in the US. We had some reactions to the different commutes, which we'll share now. Hey Lisa, do you mind giving a quick intro?
Hello world, I am Lisa. I am an urban designer in the United States, and I've been doing that for about 20 years.
Great. All right, so let's go with your reactions first.
During the Japanese commute, you can easily stop by and get something from a convenience or grocery store. But in America, you typically have to go into a big grocery store, which can take a while. Or maybe you don't even want to get out of the car, so you just go to a drive-thru. Some people won't even go to restaurants that don't have a drive-thru or do curbside pickup.
Yeah, I think it's quite common to drop by a convenience store and pick up something like an onigiri and coffee on the way when you're in Japan. One thing I noticed is that vehicles didn't stop at the train tracks. In Japan, whether or not a train is coming, you have to make a full stop.
Speaking of the trains, I loved the shot of the trains full of commuters.
I think most people in Japan would say the opposite. You're squished in and have no seat. And during peak times, it's difficult for people with disabilities, for seniors, and for pregnant people. Even though there are priority seats, people are too timid to speak up, even if they have a badge to show their condition.
I think traveling on the trains beats the miles and miles of going past sound barriers along the highways. There is so much to see when you're on the train in Japan, and you don't have to worry about other people driving while on their phones and not paying attention. In America, we have a problem related to disabilities as well. There are not enough disabled parking spots anymore. The Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990, but now there are way more seniors than there were back then, and because of that, more spots are needed.
I wouldn't have thought parking spots would be a problem since there are such big parking lots in America.
Yes, it can be because the lots are so big. It can be quite a hike for someone using a mobility aid if all the accessible spots are full. Even though there is almost no parking around the train stations in Tokyo, I find them to be so convenient, and there are so many shops around. In America, if you're driving home on a highway and you want to go to a grocery store, you have to get off the off-ramp, make some turns, wait at some traffic lights, and then you finally park your car and go in and get groceries. And then you have to get back on the highway.
Yeah, on her way back home from work, my wife would often drop by the grocery store and grab some ingredients for dinner. When there's lots of groceries, though, it's times like that where I wish we had a car in Japan. One thing I noticed is that there weren't too many pedestrians or cyclists in the U.S. commute.
Right, which is the opposite of Tokyo, isn't it? Not too many people walk or bike to work overall, and there are very few kids in America who go to school on their own.
So how do kids get to school in Indy then?
Most of them are driven by their parents.
They don't go by buses?
No, and it's somewhat because of a lack of funding. Buses have gone away, and parents are now driving their kids to schools. But it's also somewhat because of the whole stranger danger thing. Parents driving their kids to school has radically changed how schools are designed now because there needs to be lots of room for cars to queue up twice a day.
Oh, that's a big difference from Japanese schools, where some don't really even have parking lots. So students, especially in high school, where they go is not limited to geographical area, they end up taking the trains and some commute an hour just to get there. One thing I realized is that while it was close to the heart of Indy, it didn't really feel like it to me.
Right. In some major U.S. cities, the atmosphere doesn't always feel very downtown-y because the roads are so wide. They just don't feel very dense like many cities in Japan do.
I know we've talked about this video for such a long time, so I'm glad we've finally been able to do it.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me be involved. It's been a lot of fun.
So I was looking at the footage we shot in Indy, and I was kind of confused about this scene with the cop obviously in the middle of the road, and I thought the black thing, maybe that was an animal that they're just directing traffic around. But then I just kept on noticing that these UPS trucks kept on going by, one after another. So I'm wondering, why is there a cop stopping traffic letting all these trucks through? Are they filled with tons of money? Is it a premium special UPS delivery service? I don't know. If anyone in the comments can let me know, that'd be fantastic. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Peace.